I hear outside. Too late to hear anything outside, really.
I made it as a love letter to my wife, and it, in my mind, wasn't designed to be a film. It was a letter, and it was part of a gallery show that I had up in New York. It was meant to be a love letter that was in a room that was very like turbulent and kind of like foreboding feeling. I didn't think of it as a film, and but I have this very lucky thing where like Sundance kind of just shows everything I make. I've had 7 projects there, and they saw the Brief Spark animation and asked if they could show it at the festival, and I said yeah. It was interesting. It's the first film I've ever made that I really didn't care at all how audiences reacted to it, because I have no idea how it works as a film. It's a very good letter.
I hold you close. I hold you close like some idiot doctor who just loves the sound of your heart and lungs.
When you make animations, you kind of learn early on that your brain desperately wants to make sense of things. So like there's a reason why if you draw like a dot here and then a dot like 3 inches away from it, a little higher, and then a dot 3 inches away from it a little higher, that your brain all of a sudden connects those dots and makes it look like it's flying across the screen. Your brain is like desperately trying to create order of things. And when you have something like the beginning of Brief Spark is set up in a way that it's not nonsense, but there's not like a strict linear thinking to it, because it sends your brain sprawling for meaning looking throughout it. And then because I didn't just want to say like the world, because right, it's trite to say like the world is chaotic and like love is an important thing and like the most important thing. That's trite. So you want to send people's brains sprawling so that when you say something that's like powerful or moving, then they can like push the idea off like the cliff that they want to push it off of. Like there's very few people who, like my wife can actually do this, and like Truman Capote can do this, where they're like, this is the smartest thing you can think of. And I can give you an example of that. Like when I realized that I was going to marry my wife, we were hanging out in New Orleans at this like, it's called a beignet shop, which is like a small pastry in New Orleans. And it was like 3 a.m. and we're hanging out with a couple friends, and this starts off stupid and then gets good. It's just so you know. So one of the friends was like looking at people walking in, and they were like, do you ever look at 2 like really unlikely looking people and picture them having sex? And my wife was like, no, but I do try to look at people as if through the eyes of whoever loves them more than anything in the world. And I was like, holy shit, because she does do that. And that is a sentence that is so powerful that it works as a tool. It's not poetry, it's not art, it's a physical tool in the world. If you can have that sentence in your head and look at things, it'll change the way you approach the world, right? And there's very few artists and very few people throughout history. Most artists, including myself and artists that I love, no matter how great they are, even Bob Dylan, can basically say like, here is, Bob Dylan doesn't tell you the smartest thing you can think of. He sends things out, puts some nonsense in there so your brain is sprawling, and the audience thinks of the biggest thing they can think of, which is very rewarding. And then there's a few people, and very, very few people, Truman Capote, Albert Einstein, my wife, who can say, here in my hand is the biggest thing you can think of. And you're like, you're right, I can't do better than that. And then that in turn makes you turn around to the world and use that tool that they've given you. But it's a very different thing.
I check on my children. We talk about simple things. Is there a drop of water in the ocean that's never been rain, never been frozen?
When I first started making films, I desperately tried to get other people to do the narration. And I became friends with a lot of like my favorite artists, and I would always ask them, like people with great voices, like Vic Chestnut. I don't know if you know Vic and I wrote a film together. I didn't make it, and then Vic died. But I tried so hard to get Vic to do the narration to my films, and all kinds of other people too, and no one would do it. Everyone was like, "You're wrong. It's got to be your voice." And so it started off with just my voice because no one else would do it, and then ultimately I'm like, I just got to assume that they're right because like I can pay my bills, so it's working on whatever level. I usually start with like the writing and the music, and I spend a long time on it getting the sort of pacing right, and then I make the animation to this sort of demo, and then I have to go in and re-record the music and the narration to like fit what I've done with the animation. And like this one, especially since the beginning is so like, the beginning is very strange. Like it goes through a lot of things really rapidly. It is unsettling, you know, and also has like jokes in it and stuff. Like it's fast, and so I spent a really long time and wrote like hundreds and hundreds of different versions of the beginning until I was like, oh, that's pretty good, you know. And then but then the last thing that went on it, like I had made the whole film. I had, you know, recorded. The music is initially it was just me playing a piano, and I'm playing some violins on it, and the violin dresses that were in the gallery exhibit are at the beginning, and I think there's something else like a pump organ or something, and then my voice, and like I did the whole thing. I had it working as a demo, then I made the animation, re-recorded the music, and it's like it sucked, and I was like like it fell flat, and it was really a surprise. And then my wife, the plan was always to have her sing on it. She's a really great singer. She's also a drummer in like metal bands. She's great. And it like completely, like it had fallen on its face. And then when she came in and recorded she sings over it, just like layers and layers of her vocal. That is what like pushes it over the edge. Cause like by myself, I was able to like we were like all in the airplane, just kind of waiting, and she was like, "You just gotta turn this thing on, man." And then she did, and then it like took off, you know. Often, like if I'm making a painting, like I'll write at the bottom like fragile and powerful to make sure that I'm hitting like this spectrum, like that things are both incredibly fragile and incredibly powerful, which seems to me, all spectrums in art are very important to me. Like if someone's looking at a photograph, the darkest thing in the photo, the blackest thing in the photograph is black, and the whitest thing in the photograph is white, and people will see all the area between that, but nothing outside of it. And the same goes with color. The same goes with like telescope to microscope. People will see everything within the range that you give them, but nothing outside of it. And so like the powerful and fragile thing on an emotional level is like immensely important to me, and I weigh it in, but in the drawing, in the music, and in the delivery for sure. Yeah. And actually a film critic named Donna Kay wrote this like really great article on it, comparing my work to Brecht, and how basically there's like this distance created, and this stuff is designed to get you swept up in the emotion of it, but gives the viewer enough distance that they're thinking their own thoughts. They're not just being fed things. And so it has a much more, in my hope, a much more literary effect on your brain, where you're thinking about your own things going on rather than just being fed a story and waiting to know what's happening next, but still emotionally being swept up in it and being like manipulated or whatever in that way. Yeah.
I'd hold you close. I'd hold you close.
I make my living in the visual art world, and so I make a lot of sculptures and paintings and animations, and we tour my films with like live soundtracks and live narration, live Foley, and the band's like usually members of Fugazi and like Caliphone or Silver Mount Zion, like really cool indie rock folks. The previous film that I had at the Balderdash Festival was in the first year. It won in the first year. It was called Gravity. It was everywhere back then, and like for it I built an entire town in my backyard, like 5 whole houses and all this furniture and another working piano, and made this film in stop motion with real people and giant wooden characters. I think that all I'm trying to do is like I come up with like mechanical problems for myself to solve. That's it. That's all I'm really doing, I think.